Welcome to the Oracle Enterprise Manager Cloud Control 12c demo series, focusing on the best practices for Siebel applications management. This screen watch focuses on Siebel database analysis with workload tagging and EM12c. The agenda for this screen watch is straightforward. We'll provide a brief introduction and overview of the capabilities of workload tagging and how EM12c is used for database and SQL analysis. We'll also provide some background on the use case that we've created for the demonstration, and then the majority of the screen watch will be dedicated to a demonstration of the analytical capabilities for Siebel databases with workload tagging enabled. And then finally we'll conclude with some of the key takeaways and things to remember about workload tagging and EM12c. Workload tagging adds significant monitoring capability to track SQL statements being issued by any object manager-based component. It provides significant visibility to DBAs and Siebel administrators into causes of poor SQL performance, using and leveraging the capabilities of EM12c with its database plugins. In particular, DBAs and Siebel administrators can associate SQL sessions to a number of Siebel-specific parameters, such as the Siebel user ID that launched the SQL statement, the Siebel server that originated the SQL statement, and the Siebel business component, among others. Lastly, workload tagging plays a prominent role in the end-to-end management capabilities for Siebel applications in EM12c. When workload tagging is enabled, SQL statements that are generated by any object manager-based component are tagged with workload tagging attributes. There are different levels of workload tagging, and administrators can capture different levels of granularity of SQL activity. At its most granular, workload tagging can capture selects, inserts, updates, and deletes to Siebel records. These attributes have powerful analytic capabilities. Administrators can now understand the relationship between SQL statements and a number of Siebel-specific parameters. For example, the client identifier tag allows administrators to know which Siebel user launched a particular SQL statement. Similarly, administrators can also know which Siebel server initiated the SQL session, as well as which Siebel business component is responsible for the session. These capabilities are key tools for troubleshooting performance issues, as well as ensuring system optimization. In regard to version and implementation details, workload tagging is available in Siebel 8119 and 8223 and above. It's also available in EM12c 12.x and above with the associated database plugins. It's currently only available for Oracle databases, and from our internal testing, we've seen that the overhead on the database server as well as on the Siebel servers is classified as light, and also workload tagging can be set dynamically at runtime. To showcase workload tagging in the demonstration, we've created two scripts to simulate real users and database activity. We've created two sample scripts that log on to the Siebel call center, navigate to contact center, add a record, delete a record, and then log out. There are different Siebel user IDs for each script, one called bgates, the other called sjobs, and those scripts are going to execute repeatedly every 5 minutes from EM12c. The demonstration itself is going to feature the following capabilities of EM12c. We'll take a brief tour of the Siebel plugin, and then the majority of the demonstration focuses on Siebel database analysis. We'll focus on top activity, where we can view SQL sessions by the user ID, client identifier, Siebel module, and Siebel action. We'll be able to search sessions and isolate SQL sessions by client identifier and user ID, in particular the bgates and the sjobs user IDs. And we'll also look at AWR reports as well as Ash analytics. We're starting off this demonstration from the Enterprise Manager Cloud Control 12c product, and we are currently on the Siebel Enterprise list page, and the navigation path to this page is targets to the Siebel products. If there were multiple Siebel enterprises discovered within Cloud Control, all of those individual Siebel enterprises would appear here. And for the purposes of our demonstration today, we want to drill into one of the Siebel enterprises. which takes us to the Siebel Enterprise homepage. From this homepage, we have visibility into all the targets that are within a Siebel Enterprise. That would include Siebel servers, Siebel components, and Siebel component groups. And from this page, we have access to a variety of different management and monitoring tools, including looking at charts and metric collection settings, to stopping and starting different Siebel servers, all the way down through configuration and compliance capabilities as well. For the purposes of this demonstration, we actually want to go look at the Siebel database, and we can find that in the extended infrastructure targets. It's been discovered and associated with the Siebel Enterprise. And to drill down, we just need to click on the database, which takes us into the home page for this particular Siebel database. We've also now moved out of the Siebel plugin and into the database management and monitoring capabilities of Enterprise Manager. From the database homepage, we're able to begin the main portion of the demonstration, which is looking for SQL sessions based on the scripts run by bgates or sjobs. One way that we can begin to look for those is going to performance and top activity and looking at the top activity for a particular database. The top activity page maintains history of database activity for the past 24 hours. Administrators can concentrate and select different 5-minute intervals based on that activity and based on this sliding bar. By hovering over areas of peak activity, we're able to find the top sessions for that particular time range. In this particular time range, we can see two of the scripts that are running, one for sjobs and one for bgates. If we want to introspect those particular sessions, we can click on the session ID, and this provides us detail about that particular session for sjobs. And here's where the workload tagging also comes in. We can see that the client ID contains a wealth of information about object manager, server name, or Siebel user ID, what action that particular SQL session was performing, and what module it was working on as well. If we wanted to look and analyze on the SQL ID, we can also do that by clicking on that SQL ID, which takes us into the details page for that particular SQL. We can see what the exact text of that SQL has been. It looks like it was an insert statement. We can look at the activity of that particular SQL statement, and we can also begin to perform our analysis based on the statistics of that SQL statement also. The statistics page contains a wealth of information about that particular SQL session. I can look at general information, I can look at activity by weights, the execution statistics of that particular SQL, and also access a number of different tools within Enterprise Manager Cloud Control to better understand the behavior and the performance of that particular SQL. It's also worth noting that SQL monitoring comes into play for those SQL sessions lasting longer than 6 seconds. So if this particular SQL was running at greater than 6 seconds, this tab would be enabled. Returning to the top activity homepage, there are also additional dimensions which SQL sessions can be analyzed, including by top clients. In this particular view, what we can see is the results of workload tagging, the client identifier as defined by workload tagging, again including the object manager name, server name, and the Siebel user ID as well. By clicking on either one of these client IDs, we can further introspect the SQL activity that's attached to those client IDs. By returning to the top activity page, there are also a number of other tools we can employ to analyze SQL sessions, namely the ASH report. The ASH report allows us to summarize in report form SQL session activity for a particular time range. The report has a number of categories that can be used for analysis. For our purposes, we can see that the top client IDs in that particular time period were two of the Siebel script activities. Again, one for SJobs, and we can see that this is the client identifier enabled and created by workload tagging, and that the second one is for bgates, also in that same client identifier form. We can see which top SQL command types were executed during that time frame, as well as the top texts, or the text of the top SQLs as well during that time frame as well. The next use case that we'd like to demonstrate is the ability to search for SQL sessions based on workload tagging criteria, including client identifier, module, or action. The search feature can be accessed via performance and search sessions. From the search homepage, we can specify workload tagging criteria. In this example, we're looking for sessions owned by bgates or SJobs. Executing the query provides two results. In this particular view, the attributes of workload tagging are evident. You can see that in the bgates SQL session, that particular session is working on the homepage view and the action homepage, and then in the SJobs user session or SQL session, it is working on the visible contact list view and on the action, on the contact action. From this page, like in other pages, we're able to drill down into the session ID and introspect the SQL details for that particular session. There's a wealth of information on this particular page and in these particular tabs for DBAs to utilize. But what's important to notice here again is that the workload tagging information is clearly evident here in the client ID as well as in the current module and action categories. The last and perhaps most important feature of Enterprise Manager Cloud Control 12c that we'd like to demonstrate is ASH Analytics. ASH Analytics provides administrators with a more sophisticated set of tools to analyze Siebel database activity. It's accessible from the database homepage via Performance and ASH Analytics. Before we continue on with our use case, I'd like to take a moment to review the layout of this particular page. The page is divided into three regions. The top region is the time period for analysis. So administrators can set the time period selection to hours or days or weeks or even months or even on a custom basis. So on the x-axis we have the time period. On the y-axis we have different database activity levels, whether it's CPU, whether it's I/O, etc. And in addition, administrators can use this slide bar to further refine the different time periods that they would like to analyze database activity. The middle region of this page is where administrators can set filters to analyze specific SQL activity within that time period. Administrators can set filters based on certain top dimensions of database activity, whether it's weight class or weight event are two popular areas, by SQL ID, PL SQL, resource consumption, session identifiers, and as well as session attributes. And for the purpose of this demonstration, we'll be concentrating really on session identifiers and filtering activity based on our user IDs of bgates and SJobs, as well as session attributes, particularly client, action, and module, which correspond to the workload tagging attributes. The third and final region of the ASH Analytics page is the results of the SQL activity for the certain time period that's been designated with the filters that have been specified. So once the time period's been set and the filter's been applied, we can see the specific SQL IDs that are executing or have executed in that particular time frame and in with those particular filters. The results in this particular region can be further filtered and organized by those same filtering criteria. As we return to our use case of analyzing Siebel database activity based on workload tagging criteria, we've set our time period to approximately a 90-minute window, and we're going to introspect a time period in which there appears to be heightened activity on the database. Administrators can see that the time period highlighted in the first region is also reflected in the middle region. Administrators can visualize database activity based on the different criteria in this pull-down box. For the purposes of this demonstration, we're visualizing activity based on the user ID of the synthetic scripts that are running, namely sjobs and bgates. We can also change our visualization to the workload tagging identifiers. In this particular view, we're looking at the client identifier tag from workload tagging. We can see all the different sessions that are executing or were executing in this time period. And we can see different user IDs with sessions originating from different servers. Furthermore, we can look at a different aspect or attribute of workload tagging, which is the module attribute. There are a number of Siebel-specific modules that are captured that are due to workload tagging, notably the visible contact list view. And by changing the visualization parameter once again into action, we're able to see different activities or different actions from the synthetic scripts as well, notably the contact action. We'll go back and reset our filters or session identifiers to user ID, and we will filter on just those SQL sessions that are owned by bgates, so we can see that the filter is enabled there. And in the third region, we can see the SQL IDs that are owned by bgates in this particular time period in the bottom region. Once the individual SQL statements are visible and apparent in the third region, administrators can take a number of either diagnostic or troubleshooting steps. A couple of key areas to highlight is that administrators can access by selecting a particular SQL statement. They can access the SQL Tuning Advisor or create a SQL tuning set. And then finally, by clicking on one of the SQLs, we'll take the administrator into the SQL diagnostics and the top activity pages that we've seen in previous screen watches. Administrators can then access the different tools to further analyze SQL performance within Enterprise Manager Cloud Control. In conclusion, workload tagging provides significant visibility for Siebel administrators into causes of poor SQL performance, leveraging the capabilities of Oracle Enterprise Manager Cloud Control 12c and its associated database plugins. Siebel administrators can associate SQL sessions to a number of SQL-specific parameters, such as Siebel user ID, Siebel server details, as well as Siebel business components. And finally, workload tagging plays a prominent role in the end-to-end management capabilities for Siebel applications in Enterprise Manager Cloud Control 12c. This concludes the presentation for workload tagging for Siebel applications. Thank you for watching this demonstration. For more information, please visit the following website.